Let's turn to Rafah, the southern city in Gaza. Now, the Israeli leadership seems to believe that a full-scale ground military invasion of Rafah will finish the job of eliminating Hamas. You've said that that's not realistic. Now, your critics would say that with its gleeful mutilations, its rampages, its rapes and beheadings, its baby killing on October 7, Hamas needs crushing. And if Hamas keeps control of Rafah and the people, it wins.
The Israelis may believe that Hamas needs to be crushed. And you can understand, given what happened on October 7th, why they feel that way. They're not going to crush Hamas. And if you read the newspapers carefully every day, you will see that Hamas has come back to life in northern Gaza, and the Israelis have now sent military forces into northern Gaza to deal with Hamas. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal today have articles dealing with the fact that Hamas is almost impossible to defeat. They're just not going to defeat them. This is why I said to you, ethnic cleansing is so attractive to the Israelis. Ethnic cleansing solves the apartheid problem, what Tom was challenging me on a minute ago, and it solves the Hamas problem, which he's challenging me on now.
Many Democratic legislators who have traditionally been very supportive of Israel have called on Netanyahu to be replaced. To what extent would things change in Gaza and the Israeli military operation in Gaza if Netanyahu is replaced, as many Democratic lawmakers and indeed Bret Stephens at the New York Times has called for Netanyahu to be removed? How would things change?
Not at all. This is an argument that I hear in the United States, and it's made by liberal American Jews, people like Tom Friedman.
At the New York Times?
Yeah, at the New York Times, who believe that Netanyahu is an anomaly, and if we could only get rid of him and replace him with Thomas Jefferson or somebody like that, Israel will live happily ever after. This is a foolish argument, right? It's quite clear that Netanyahu and his war cabinet and most of the national security elite in Israel today agree with Israeli policy under Netanyahu. So it
wouldn't change anything.
It wouldn't change anything. It would change hardly anything.
Now, you say Israel has had Iran in its sights for a long time, but isn't it true that Iran's Shia theocracy has also had Israel in its sights for a long time? After all, many of their leaders have declared the eradication of Israel off the face of the map.
Look, there's no question that Iran considers Israel to be a mortal enemy and would like to do away with the Jewish state, the same way Hezbollah would like to do away with the Jewish state. So there's no question about that. And there's no question that the Israelis hate the Iranians or hate Iran. And it's a case of mutual hatred, mutual dislike, call it what you want. There's no question about it. Who is responsible for starting this? The implication of your question was that it is Iran that's responsible, not Israel.
Well, it's their leaders that talk about this, about eradicating Israel off the face of the earth. It's pretty provocative, isn't it?
I agree. That's correct. But I'm just saying it's not clear that they started it. You want to remember that Iran once had very good relations with Israel, once had very good relations with the United States, and that even in the 1990s, the Iranians were interested in improving relations with the United States. And one could make an argument that if you had gotten a two-state solution, that Iran would have reconciled itself to dealing with this problem. So, we haven't talked much about the two-state solution in large part because I sort of took it off the table early on. But it's very important to understand that every American president since Jimmy Carter has pushed hard on the two-state solution because we think the two-state solution, we meaning American elites, think the two-state solution is the only reasonable way to get out of this conundrum. What has to be done here is that the Palestinians have to be given self-determination. They need a sovereign state of their own. And this is what the two-state solution was designed to do. And American leaders understood that if the Israelis did not agree to a two-state solution, and you did not get a two-state solution, you were going to have trouble for as far as the eye can see. You all understand, maybe the younger people in the audience don't, but what happened on October 7th is really not an anomaly. There was the first intifada, then there was the second intifada.
Late 80s and early 2000s.
Pardon?
Late 80s and the early 2000s?
Yes, 1987 was the first intifada and 2000 was the second intifada. And these were, Palestinian insurrections.
But John, you could get a two-state solution with the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank, but Hamas has made it very clear, as you've acknowledged, that they don't support a two-state solution.
Absolutely, there's no question about that. Just want to be very clear here. This gets back to my point that Netanyahu was playing divide and conquer, right? Netanyahu had quite good relations with Hamas before October 7th because Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution and Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution. And from Netanyahu's point of view, the real threat was Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority. And you notice, by the way, that the Americans have been saying that what we need to do in Gaza is put the Palestinian Authority in control, get Hamas out of the way, and put the Palestinian Authority in control. Netanyahu has made it unequivocally clear this is not happening. And that's because the Palestinian Authority has reconciled itself to a two-state solution. And that's nightmare news for Netanyahu.
You say that Tehran's hand has been strengthened during this dispute, but let me put this to you. Iran is surrounded by hostile Sunni states. Across the Persian Gulf sits Saudi Arabia. It's fanatically anti-Shia and well-armed archenemy. In Iraq and Syria, at least until recently, you had Iran facing large Sunni insurgencies dedicated to slaughtering the Shia. Then there's the internal unrest within Iran. A lot of younger people, a lot of younger Iranians take a more liberal view about the world than their parents and certainly the Shia clerical regime. So are you overlooking Iran's real weaknesses and limitations?
Well, he only gave me 50 minutes to talk. If he had been willing to fulfill my request to be able to talk for 2 hours, I would have qualified my argument somewhat. No, there's absolutely no question that Iran has significant problems. But the thing you want to remember about Iran is that Iran is much more powerful than all of its neighbors. It has a very large population, and the human capital inside of Iran is very impressive, right? And if you were to look at the potential balance of power between Iran and Saudi Arabia, if they were both able to mobilize all their resources, it's a Bambi versus Godzilla situation. That's why the Saudis are so interested in the Abraham Accord. The Saudis want to jump into bed with the Israelis and the Americans because the Saudis understand that the Iranians have a lot of potential power, right? Whenever you want to measure the power of a country, the two things that you go to, number one are population size, and number two are wealth. Number two is wealth, right? Wealth and population size. And you look at the Iranian situation, they are potentially a very powerful country, which is not to take away from your points about the problems that they face.
Okay, now it's time for question time.